I, 26F, had a baby about 4 months ago with my husband of 3 years, Keith, 27M. We didn't intend to get pregnant, we weren't trying, but when we discovered that we decided to go along with it. My parents were the most excited about it at the time, and ironically, they're the ones who are the least happy about the baby currently. So my parents have always loved the idea of having a big family with lots of kids and grandkids. I have 2 siblings, an older brother, 30M, and a younger sister, 20F. My brother has 2 kids of his own, both under 7 years old. Once I got married, my parents began to pester me about having kids, but I didn't pay any heed to them. It had barely even been a month to my wedding, so I wasn't interested in having a child so soon. I wanted some time alone with Keith before we had kids to travel and have our fun, but my parents started pressuring me within a few months of my marriage. They'd incessantly speak about the joys of being a parent without mentioning any of the difficulties that came along with it. I ignored them back then because I had no other choice than to put up with it. They'd been wonderful parents to all 3 of us, but as we got older, they'd become more and more bothersome to have a conversation with because of their weird obsession with our lives. My brother believed that it was because they were both retired now and didn't have anything to do all day, so they decided to obsess over our lives instead. First, they'd pestered my brother to have kids, which he did because he did want kids of his own at some point. And then once I got married, they started on me. I'd made up my mind that I wasn't gonna let them wear me down, and I'd only have kids whenever I thought I wanted to, so I patiently put up with them for the first couple of months. Then, eventually, I began to tell them that having kids wasn't in the cards for us at the moment, but I'd think about it just to get them off my back. Around a year and a half ago, they approached me and told me very bluntly that I didn't have to worry about the finances of having a baby because they'd cover it all for me and were even ready to give it to me up front. They'd thought that I might have been worried about the financial toll of having a child, and so offered to literally write a check for whatever amount I quoted, as long as they'd have a grandkid in their arms in the coming months. I did some thinking back then and decided that I was going to take a whopping $30,000 from them, for a couple of reasons. Before people start judging me, let me just say that I'm a sales associate and my husband is an insurance agent, so if someone's offering us money, you best believe we'll take them up on that offer. No questions asked. We don't make a fortune at our jobs, and my parents were offering me a blank check to fill in myself for the future, so that was my first reason to agree to their proposition. Secondly, Keith and I had discussed kids, and both of us agreed that we definitely did want them, just not right now. It would happen when it would happen, but we weren't going to try on purpose. So I took the money from them, keeping in mind that this money would help us at that moment and we'd have kids whenever we had them, no pressure. It wasn't technically lying, so I didn't feel guilty either. Also, with the way my parents had endlessly been nagging me, taking the money from them actually seemed like a good idea because that would convince them that we were now going to start trying for a baby, and that would finally get them off my back. After I took the money from them, they did ease up on the constant pressure and would only ask if I had news for them instead of their usual have a baby rant every time they visited or I visited them. I didn't have any plans on what to do with the money, even though Keith and I had always talked about multiple things, like taking a vacation or just buying expensive things that we'd always wanted. We didn't end up doing any of that eventually because I guess our conscience didn't allow us to spend the money on anything that didn't serve the purpose it was originally intended for. It'd just feel dishonest, and we didn't want that for ourselves. So we kept the money aside and didn't spend it at all, and as fate would have it, we ended up getting pregnant within a few months itself. Keith and I thought that it was the right time, so we went ahead with the pregnancy, and my parents were also really supportive of me throughout the pregnancy and childbirth. The problems began once my son was born. About a month ago, my son was diagnosed with SID and our world came crashing down around us. It was terrible knowing that my baby was suffering, but it was even worse knowing that there was very little we could do to help except go through with the medical treatments and pray for his well-being. I was never a very religious person, but once my son was diagnosed, I turned to religion because I knew what SID meant and the kind of havoc it could wreak on our lives. Our son is supposed to have a stem cell transplant in a couple of weeks, and Keith is the donor, so I'm just hoping it goes well and my son can make it. In the middle of all this, my parents have been the worst and have been demanding that I return the money I'd taken from them. A week ago, my parents visited me while my husband wasn't at home, and I could tell right away that they weren't here with good news. They seemed very nervous and uncomfortable, which was weird because usually they were excited to play with their grandson. Things had changed after the diagnosis, though, and they hadn't called or checked up on us the way I'd expected them to. In fact, if I remember correctly, their visit 1 week ago was their first visit after the diagnosis, which was strange given their earlier behavior. I'd thought that they were just trying to process the news as well, but was proven wrong when, after some small talk, my parents told me that they would require the money back because my baby wasn't what they'd expected. When I didn't reply, they went on to elaborate and told me that since there was a real possibility that my son wouldn't live for long, they'd like their money back because they felt like giving me the money had been a misstep in the first place. To put it plainly, they wanted a refund of sorts because unfortunately my only son, who isn't even a year old yet, has been diagnosed with a rare autoimmune disease, which means that there's no surety of him living long enough for even his first birthday. I didn't know how to respond to them that day, so I just told them that I had a lot on my plate and I didn't want to talk about this at the time, and sent them away. Mostly I was just shocked and had no idea what to say in a situation like that, which is why I just didn't say anything. I probably should have screamed at them and put them in their place, but that would have woken my son up, who was napping, so I dealt with them in the most non-violent and civilized way, which was a lot more than what they deserved. When my husband returned home, I told him about what my parents had asked of us, and even he was at a loss of words. They were the ones who had willingly offered me the money as an incentive to have a child and to help us out with our finances, but now that they'd realized that our baby was not the healthy, happy kind that they'd hoped for, they wanted their money back. We were outraged and I didn't want to speak to them ever again, so after discussing with Keith, I blocked their numbers and also blocked them on social media. I didn't send them any message before that because I didn't think it was worth it, but it backfired when the very next day, my sister called me up to ask me why I'd blocked them. She's still living with them, so I guess they're using her as a pawn to get to me, and she's letting them because she needs a roof over her head. At first, I told her that it was none of her business, but after she insisted, I ended up telling her what happened and expected her to empathize with me, but instead, she told me how wrong I was for misleading my parents into believing they'd have a grandkid to pamper and play with for a long time, but then emotionally wrecking them by breaking the news of the diagnosis and then refusing to even pay them back. I got into an argument with her which ended with me blocking her as well because she'd said some very problematic things about me and my baby. She'd called us irresponsible parents for bringing a defective child into the world without thinking about the repercussions. Everyone in the family knew that we hadn't planned for a baby, and during the several doctor's visits, we had never been warned about the risk of our baby having SID. Neither Keith nor I had any idea that this could happen because there was literally a 1 in a million chance of it happening, but unfortunately, it did, and we're just trying our best to deal with it. So I thought it was pretty damn insensitive of them to demand their money back when we were struggling with something so huge. After their phone call, I even called my brother to vent about them, and he agreed that they were being very unreasonable and cruel to me. My son was not a product they'd purchased and were now looking for a refund since it hadn't worked out for them the way they'd wanted it to. Speaking to my brother helped me make sense of things, and for a while, I was able to take my mind off of whatever the situation was with my parents. Unfortunately, they didn't let this go, and 3 days ago, my parents dropped by yet again, but this time Keith was at home with me. He tried to turn them away at the door, but they were insistent and demanded to see me. I just put my son down for a nap and was in no mood to talk to them, but they were refusing to leave, so I eventually had to go out to talk to them. They didn't even spare a second before they started yelling at me and even accused me of being a thief who'd taken their money and in return, birthed a child who would bring us all nothing but misery. They actually accused me of scamming them and said that if I didn't return the money to them, they'd call the cops on me and make sure I landed behind bars. I didn't even bother replying to them and just slammed the door shut in their faces because there wasn't much I could say to something as horrible as that. If they were gonna call me a scammer for just giving birth to my child, then they didn't even deserve a reply. They refused to go away still and kept shouting outside of my house until Keith threatened to call the police and have them escorted off the premises. They finally went away after that, but unfortunately, the bullcrap didn't end there. Yesterday, my sister texted me through her friend's phone and told me that I needed to return the money or else she'd really sue me along with our parents. I told her to go right ahead and block that number, but in the evening, she texted through another number and said a bunch of things to blackmail me into feeling bad. Apparently, I was cruel and heartless for scamming our parents, and I'd taken advantage of their age and kindness by taking the money from them and now by refusing to return it after they'd practically begged me to. I wish I was there when this begging had happened because to my knowledge, they'd only demanded what was no longer theirs. Also, my parents aren't poor, they could afford to spend $30,000 on us having a kid, and that's why they did so. They retired a couple of months ago after successfully running their own business, and they're making money off of it even now. I'd never asked them for the money, they'd offered it themselves, so now they couldn't go back and pretend to be the victims of some scam. I told my sister to back off once and for all because I really didn't want to ruin my relationship with her, and I knew for a fact that she was only going to such lengths because my parents were manipulating her into doing so. She didn't have a stable job yet, and that's why she was so desperate to have a place to live in, which is why I could still forgive her, but I was kind-hearted, not a fool who would take her back regardless of how much she insulted me. She already had insulted me badly enough for me to never want to speak to her again, so it would be in her best interest to back off because after our parents passed away, we were the only ones she'd be able to count on as family. Anyway, that's not the point right now, so after that text, She replied to me and told me that I was the one who was making my parents miserable and that they were already going through a lot knowing that their grandkid might not make it, while I was making it worse by refusing to return the money they'd spent on his birth. I couldn't believe the audacity of that when I was literally a mother who could lose her child, but somehow, even now, they were the victims here and not me. I called my brother to talk about it and he told me that at this point, I should just return the money to get them off my back. I cannot do that because there are a lot of medical expenses to cover given the stem cell transplant that's about to take place in a few weeks from now. I have many more things to think about right now, and I honestly don't think that my parents even deserve to have that money back. Point blank, I just don't feel like they should get that money back ever at any point in their lives after the way they've treated me. I don't know if that makes me right or wrong in this situation because I know it's probably not very ethical, but then again, nothing that my parents have done is ethical either. The bottom line is that even if I could, I wouldn't want to return that money to my parents simply out of spite in the way that they've behaved with me. They've said the most unforgivable things a parent can say about their own grandchild, a grandkid they insisted we have, by the way. So I just don't see any reason as to why I should pay them back even if it is the morally right thing to do. I can't make them suffer the way I'm suffering right now, but I can at least bother them like this, and I know it's petty, but right now, I don't care. My son's in a life-threatening situation and all they care about is their money, so they deserve to be treated badly, in my opinion. So Ida for not wanting to return my parents the money that they'd given me as an incentive to have a child after it turns out that my son has an autoimmune disease? Update 1. Firstly, thank you so much everybody for all your kind words and your prayers. I'm hoping it all has its effect. We've been in and out of the hospital for the past few weeks because my son is undergoing chemo at the moment. That's sort of a prerequisite before stem cell transplant for those who weren't aware. The constant hospital visits plus the added harassment that my parents have been putting me through is what made me snap. I've avoided going to the cops so far because the last thing I need is a police report to deal with or legalities to take care of just to get my parents to stop bothering us. I know most of you meant well while suggesting that, but it's not very feasible for us right now, so we're trying to keep that on the back burner for now. It's quite literally our very last resort and we have no intention of taking this to the cops as of now. We're too busy and mentally exhausted to even consider it. We have blocked them on every single platform possible and it's been 3 days since I posted. They haven't tried to contact us as of now, but there's no telling what they might do next. I don't have any intention of paying them back because I'm still sticking with what I said. They don't deserve it. I know some of you guys might disagree with this, but I honestly don't care anymore. Most people thought that I was in the right because they were the ones who pushed me to have a kid in the first place, and now they're mad because our son wasn't the healthy baby boy they wanted. They can cry me a river, but I refuse to feel bad for them and lean into their self-victimization. We're the ones who are suffering because we see our son as a real human being and not as a plaything that we can just discard if it's not good enough by our standards. I don't know what kind of people my parents are, but they don't fit into my definition of good parents anymore. They're the worst because they've put me down at my lowest, and I'm sure this will come back to them at some point in their miserable little lives or whatever is left of it. I don't even feel guilty saying any of this now because the comments have made me realize just how screwed up my parents were. Even my sister said some unforgivable crap, but I was ready to cut her some slack just because I thought she was a kid and needed mom and dad to be on her side, but I take that back now. She's a selfish brat, and I think 21 is old enough to be able to tell apart right from wrong, so there's absolutely no reason for her to be acting this way towards me. Especially when my husband and I have been nothing but kind to her all along. My brother is super disappointed and has cut them all off along with us, which is something I'm really and truly grateful for. He and my husband are pretty much the only people who have kept me going because things have been just so incredibly hard for me mentally. No parent is ever prepared to learn that their kid might not make it, and to face it all while my own family is harassing me for money is just unimaginable. The cruelty and heartlessness have taken their toll on me, but I have to stay strong for Keith's sake and my son's. The transplant is supposed to take place in just 2 weeks and we've been nervous like never before. My husband is the donor and he's a wreck. I've literally never seen him so jittery before. He already has an anxiety disorder and the crazy situation we're in right now has just made matters worse for his nerves. My parents knew about this, but that didn't stop them because that's how awful they are. I hope this comes back to them tenfold because otherwise, I'll pretty much lose all faith in the justice of the universe. Update 2. Hi, everyone. My brother called me today to inform me that our parents, along with our sister, had visited him now that I'd blocked them and had threatened to call the cops on them if they bothered us again. They were there to tell him how I'd scammed them out of $30,000, but my brother had been very quick to shut it down. He informed me that he'd chewed them out and they hadn't expected him to be so brutal and harsh with his words. My brother's the calmest guy ever to exist, so if he's being brutal with someone, they've definitely earned it. He hated confrontation, but he told me that after he heard the way mom and dad were talking about me and my son, he couldn't just sit back and let them get away with it. Unfortunately, my parents thought that it would be a good idea to argue, and my sister even tried to back them up, so they had to be unceremoniously evicted from my brother's house by his wife. My sister-in-law is a bit of a hothead, but only when the situation calls for it, and this time, she knew the situation was dire and she needed to step up and push them out. She hadn't even wanted to let them in at all, but our whole family has a soft spot for my younger sister. However, she's really not that young anymore and cannot expect to get away with her horrible behavior. My sister-in-law was very nice to me on the phone since my son's transplant procedure takes place tomorrow, but she won't be able to be there for us. Someone has to stay home and watch the kids, and her usual babysitter bailed on her. My brother's coming along with me though, so I'm hoping that things will be fine. I'm nervous, but it's nothing compared to what my husband has been going through. Keith is still a nervous ball of stress, but I'm doing my best to keep him calm so no unforeseen complications arise. I don't know if that's even possible, to be honest, but at the moment, I'm not willing to take any risks. We talked just a couple of hours ago about how we'd never seen any of this coming, but we're still dealing with it a lot better than we'd expected. We hadn't even planned on becoming parents, but yet here we are, and if fate is on our side, we'll be parents for a really, really long time. I know I've said this before, but please continue to pray for our son's well-being. Also, Keith's, because he's going through a lot, too. I have to be up and about in a few hours, but I've become a bit of an insomniac, which is why I'm posting this so late at night. I guess this is one of those things I'll have to get used to eventually. Update 3. Hi. Thanks for the prayers and good wishes. It's been close to 3 months since the transplant and he's been responding well. I'll keep this update short because we're still busy with a lot of work, including the restraining order I've had to file against my parents and my sister after they started harassing me and cyberbullying me recently. Yep, they're really the worst of the worst. Update 4. More than a year has passed since the last update, and I'll be honest, I'd pretty much forgotten because I got too caught up with my own life. My son celebrated his first birthday a week ago, and we think he's going to live a long, long life now. He's doing just fine. His body is responding well to the procedure, and we could not be more grateful for it. My parents and sister have had no contact with us since we filed that restraining order, and neither has my brother heard from them. We intend on keeping it that way for the rest of our lives because I don't think anyone needs them or their negative energy around their families. I don't care whether they even live or not at this point. They're as good as gone to me. Right now, my only family is Keith, my brother, his family, and of course, my darling little son. I literally don't care about anyone else because these are the people who stood by me in my toughest times, and I know I can always count on them in the future. Also, you guys, because some of you had continued to check up on me through comments and messages, and I'll be forever thankful for that. It really was heartwarming for me to realize that people had continued to pray for my son and our little family. So thank you so much.